Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Welcome to another episode of the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell. And those of you that have listened to my show for a while know that I'm focused on bringing as guests people who have worked on their own development and also are very passionate about encouraging others to achieve their full potential. And today I'm really excited to have a guest who's focused on a specific group that way. And I can hardly wait to have the conversation. So welcome, Ariana Tadler.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here, Meredith.
Well, I am so excited about the conversation that I know we're going to be having. And I want to first give a shout out to our mutual friend, Steve Fretzen. He's a fellow podcaster. I was a guest on his show. And as we were talking afterwards, and I was telling him about who I enjoy having as guests on my show, he said, "Oh, you must meet Ariana." So here we are. We had a wonderful first conversation, and that's why I know this one is going to be fabulous. So let me introduce you to my audience before we get into our conversation. Ariana is the founding partner of Tadler Law LLP, a woman-owned boutique law firm that offers an array of litigation and legal counseling services. Ariana is one of the leading women litigators in the country. She has 30 years of experience advocating for consumers and investors against corporate fraud and abuse. We certainly need that. Ariana is also recognized as one of the nation's leading authorities on electronic discovery. She pioneered the establishment of an e-discovery practice group within a plaintiff's firm structure 20 years ago. Ariana is also a professional and keynote speaker. She speaks on an array of topics stemming from her decades of experience as a lawyer, entrepreneur, founding partner, woman in tech, mentor, and mother. I love that last part. Mothering teaches us so much.
Indeed.
So, Ariana, I gave a pretty good background of you, but I know I left out some parts of your story. I'd love to have you fill those in and tell us what it is you're most passionate about these days.
Oh, thank you so much, Meredith, for this opportunity. This is exciting. So I have been a practicing lawyer, litigator for over 30 years, and I had wanted to be a lawyer from the time that I was 13 years old. And I've really loved the practice of law. And obviously now my name is on the door, and that's exciting too. So in addition to being a practicing lawyer, I'm a business owner. I'm an entrepreneur. You mentioned my experience in the e-discovery world. I built that structure, a whole practice group, both the technologists as well as the lawyers within a law firm structure, then took that business, launched it out of a law firm and made it into a thriving company, which was known as Meta e-discovery. And that was my side hustle while I was practicing law under a firm moniker. And then in 2023, it was announced that Repario Data really took Meta E in with a number of other companies as part of a very large integration and took our whole team, et cetera. So I have now had the opportunity to start focusing my sights on a new side hustle. What else is it that I want to be doing? Of course, the number one focus has to be my law firm. And you gave a lovely description. And we are very proud of the fact that over the last 4.5 years, we're about to celebrate our 5th year anniversary in June.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It really is quite the accomplishment, particularly because I never envisioned having my name on the door. That was not an aspiration per se of mine. Ultimately, I did do it and I've enjoyed doing it. And I made a commitment to the team and a commitment to myself that if I was going to do that, I wanted to make sure that we further diversified the practice. So we still do all the things that you mentioned, and we also provide a number of other services, including litigation, arbitration. We provide legal counsel and consulting when it comes to employment relationships. When people have disputes, they need a lawyer who's going to be effective and really focus on getting a resolution as quickly as possible. Perhaps without litigation, we also are a go-to resource. And if you go to our website at tadlerlaw.com, you'll see our new branding as part of our new website and our new tagline, which is really emblematic of who we are. We own the room. When we come in on your behalf, we are there to own the room, direct and lead the conversation. So that is my day-to-day, right? What I'm supposed to be focused on. What's my new venture and focus? My real focus, my real passion right now is junior professionals, young adults in between the ages of 18 to 35. You mentioned the various descriptors that I use for myself, one of which is mother. I have two 20-somethings who I'm very proud to say are financially independent. They live out on their own. One's in LA, one's in New York, and they're successful at what they do. And I've also had the opportunity to see the struggles that young people have because so much in the world has changed over the last number of years. And I attribute that to two things. One, the ubiquity of technology. What do I mean by the ubiquity? That's a big word. Sometimes people are like, what do you mean? It's the fact that we are overwhelmed by technology. And I call it the pings and the dings and the notifications, and you've got multiple devices at all times. And so young people in that age group have lived and breathed their lives with this technology. And I say, in some way, they got lost in the haze of the blue light. And so that's why I'm focused on communication skills, professionalism, executive functioning, things that you and I may take for granted because we learned them in an office setting, in a school setting where we were surrounded by people. There were people all the time. And now we're seeing that junior professionals and young adults are not necessarily in the community of people at all times where they're learning through osmosis of community. And the other item that I would attribute, so not just the haze of the blue light, also, of course, the fact that the world suffered through a pandemic. And that led to this remote work, remote school. Even if you say hybrid, it's still not the same. And we have a responsibility, and I've made this a mission for myself, that we have a responsibility to raise our young adults and teach them the skills that they need, especially to help those who have a desire and the drive to be leaders. How are they going to excel? They need these skills. How does one communicate clearly? How does one make sure that they show up in a particular venue, community, situation the right way? And there's the physicality, there's the emotional IQ, the intellectual IQ, and what platforms are we using to communicate? What words, what vocabulary are we using in one setting versus another? And I had this great experience with my husband over the weekend. We were going over a bridge in the car and we were talking about social media. And I do a lot of work on LinkedIn, and I'm just beginning to venture into the Instagram world. And I said, I'm uncomfortable. It just feels difficult for me to just do a video or start saying things. And he said, well, of course. He said, you're a trained lawyer. You've worked on these skills of being very strategic and focused, and there are parameters. Social media is different. It's social, right? And so that was such an aha moment for me when I thought, oh my goodness, that further adds to what I am so driven and passionate about, thinking about adding that into the mentoring and the teaching. So I'm building a consulting business now to come in and speak to corporations and firms and communities of young people, colleges, business schools, et cetera. What are some of the key skills that we need to make sure that young professionals, junior professionals have? Because when they're at home or they're out and about and they're doing social media or where they're with their friends, there's a different kind of communication that's happening in contrast to when we're in a work setting or we're in a school setting and we need to be focused.
Yes. Let's go deeper with that. I want to cover all three of those topics that you
Sure.
mentioned, but of course, communication is such a biggie. It's one of, my big passions. I would love for you to talk a little bit about what you've observed in the challenges that young people face trying to be clear communicators in the workplace. Where's the gap from what they've been doing on social media and interacting, let's say, in a more casual way? What are some of the issues that they're running into, and what are you recommending that they do to overcome those?
Sure. So I always start with know your audience, right? Know your audience. Now, I've known that as a professional speaker and also as a persuasive advocate, as a lawyer. When I'm practicing law, am I speaking to a client? Am I speaking to my adversary? Am I speaking to a judge? In many ways, the communication may be very similar, and yet there are nuances in each place, right? When I'm talking to a client, I need to ask a lot of questions. I need to hear vulnerability and also share vulnerability so that that client feels comfortable and safe. And that's the way that we make sure that we understand each other and I can best serve that client and my team can best serve that client. When I'm talking to my adversary, I want to absolutely be very clear about what it is that I'm saying, what I'm trying to achieve. And I am very mindful about much of the writing and discussion about difficult conversations. Often when you're talking to an adversary in the practice of law, they can be difficult conversations. They don't all have to be. And so choosing words carefully and also responding, not reacting, makes such a difference. And so many people who speak about and write about negotiation talk about how critical it is to come to conversations and negotiation in a responsive, listening and responsive manner as opposed to a reactive manner. You're much more likely to achieve success in negotiation when you do that. And then when you speak to a judge, of course, we start out with ultimate deference, respect, and of course, we also have to be persuasive advocates. There's a whole kind of set of boundaries that goes around all of those conversations, right? And yet, when we're outside that scope, so if we're talking about somebody perhaps who's grown up with social media and all of these tech devices and more of an easier going, a lighter touch on the formality of communication in day-to-day life, the challenge is harder for them when they come into the community space of a profession, of a business, of a job, of being even in a higher education or aspect. And so when you think about it, we're expecting a greater transformation or a greater switch as they move from one space to the other. And what I'm very focused on is helping young adults to understand that they can find a natural rhythm to move from when they're with their friends and their colleagues and they're on social media to these other places where we have to be really focused on how we best present ourselves. If we want to be heard, if we want to be understood, if we want to be respected. I think there's a fair number of people out there who would say, well, we'd prefer that there not even need to be a transformation or a transition. It would be great if we could expect young people to just communicate consistently across all manners or platforms. That's just not how they have been raised. That's not what they've been taught, what they've understood, what they've digested. And so we can all sit here, for those of us who are older and more senior in our positions, and be frustrated. Or we can say, oh my goodness, we really want to make sure that we can identify leaders for our own succession plans. One of the things that I think about is, what is the world going to look like for you and me, Meredith, 10 years, 20 years down the road, when perhaps you and I are doing something else more leisurely? And how will these young adults raise up so that they too can be leaders? The people who are going to be leaders are going to be the people who truly excel in their communication skills, in their sense of professionalism and getting things done. There's a great book by David Allen, Getting Things Done. It's fabulous. Steve Fretzen mentions it. And then also about just basic executive functioning. What do we mean by that? How do we present ourselves? How do we show up? How do we make sure that we engage in responsible time management? In fairness to younger people, many of them were really never taught habits for time management. I don't know about you. I grew up in high school being that girl who walked around with a Filofax. I'm dating myself. I did check. Filofax still exists, by the way. A Filofax, which is in essence a planner. And you could have different inserts and you open little binder rings and you had your calendar and your to-do lists, etc. Well, yes, there are planners out there. Many of them are wonderful. There are also technological tools, that you can choose, that you can do this all online. That's great. Those are the means. They are the materials you use. What about how to use them and how to make them part of your day-to-day existence? If we don't have that kind of executive functioning across all generations, it's very difficult to realistically expect and rely upon accountability.
Well, when we think about what you've been talking about, the how to show up in the workplace, whatever role they're having, and they want to be able to advance. Let's just say that you're the manager of a young person who's come on your team, right? And so you're noticing the casualness of and lack of precision, let's say, and professionalism in the way they talk, and the lack of a sense of structure and real understanding of how to organize and manage their time. Where would you start? What would be the first thing that you would do in coaching this person? Because I know I have a lot of listeners who have young people on their teams and have heard, feedback from some of them who are enthusiastic about these young people and their positive energy and they're wanting to make a contribution. And on the other side, some who don't understand them and really don't know how quite to connect with them. And I so agree with you that it's important to see the potential in these individuals and recognize there are leaders, future leaders among them. So you're the manager of this person. How are you going to coach and mentor them to bridge those gaps that they might currently have?
So first and foremost, connectivity is key. One of the things that we've lost in so many different businesses is the lack of in-person engagement. And we have to be realistic. There are lots of businesses that have morphed such that they really are remote, and much of it is going to be via Zoom or some other mechanism. And yet we still have to make sure that we're having conversations. So we do two things at the firm. Actually, we do three. One, we have team building and team orientation meetings where we go around the room and we talk about what's working and what's not. Your question is really directed at manager to an individual. In that case, we have individualized discussions. We're very attuned to when we feel like somebody might be off. Either their body language is different in the course of a group Zoom or a meeting or even a one-on-one, or you even notice it could be in a phone call, it could be in an email. You just sense out of the word choice that there's a different tone. Something has changed. And so we make a point of picking up the phone or getting on a video conference to make sure that we can say, how are you doing? How's everything going? And then bringing into the conversation, I think what you're trying to get at the heart of, which is We ourselves as managers, as supervisors, as owners, we have concerns that we want this person to show up or do certain things and that's not happening to our expectations. So we ask questions first. It's always good to start asking questions. Where is somebody at? How are they feeling, et cetera? Because you can discern from that, where is that person sitting in the moment, emotionally, intellectually, physically? That should help me as a leader. That should help you as a leader to determine, is this the right moment to have this conversation? Because we want the conversation to be well received, right? And so assuming it's the right time, I like to start with, we're so grateful that you're a member of our team. We so value your contributions. One of the things we want to share with you is that we continue to build our brand. And I don't know if we've fairly articulated to you so that you can be part of the build. Here are the elements of our brand. When I go out and speak to clients or to courts or to an adversary, I want to make sure that I come across as the ultimate professional. The way in which I present myself, how I dress, the word choice that I make, so that there is no risk at any point in time that somebody might say, oh, she was rude. Oh, she was talking to me as if I was, out at a baseball game or on the beach. Or, was she serious? I didn't know if she was serious. She was sort of talking very informally. I'm not really sure, is she the real deal? And also making sure that, I mentioned things like the reliability or the consistency of the communication, that I am very strategic. I come prepared to meetings, even meetings like this one that I'm having with you, John or Susie. I'm having this meeting with you, and I came prepared. I started thinking about the conversation that I wanted to have. And I would say to this person, imagine if you came to every meeting like that. You would feel actually validated, empowered to have a better conversation and then bringing it back around. We're building a brand. We want you to be part of the brand. We want you to feel that when you go out, you're representing the firm proudly. And that's not just because you're proud to be with us. Of course, we're proud to have you. It's also that you feel that you are contributing to the build, right? You can take some ownership of that. And trying to engage people in this sense of how critical it is to communicate clearly, to demonstrate that when they get up in the morning and they show up for work, they're committed. Right? And I mean, one of the things I shared with you is that I really espouse this concept. It's a little bit of an adjustment to what has been mentioned as the 3 8s, right? 24 hours in a day. Let's commit to 8 hours of sleep. Let's start there. You now have 16 hours left in a 24-hour day. What are you going to do with those 16 hours? I like to break down the weekend apart from the week. So the week, we have 5 days. You've got 16 hours. Let's assume you're going to be committing some number of those 16 hours every day to your job or school, whatever your responsibility component is. The reason it's called the 3 8s is because when it was originally articulated, it was 8 hours work, 8 hours job or school, 8 hours for fun, leisure, etc. We don't live in a world that way anymore, right? Let's still start with 8 hours of sleep. Let's use that as our anchor. Let's put 8 hours as, with some brackets, work, school. Maybe it's 10 hours, maybe it's 6 hours. And then we have these other hours left. Those other hours are not purely for leisure. They can't possibly be. We have responsibilities. We have personal hygiene. We have errands to run. We have to do some laundry. We have to-dos. We need to pay our bills. We need to go grocery shopping. We need to add all that in, and we still have to make sure that we've got the joy factor in there. How do we make sure the joy factor's in there? So 5 days a week, let's give the 8 hours of leisure plus life. That's 40. You've got your weekend, assuming you're not working. Let's be fair. There are many people who work more than 5 days a week. We need to respect that. Let's assume that on your weekend, you sleep 8 hours. You got 16 hours twice, Saturday and Sunday. That's 32 plus your 40, 72 hours. Those 72 hours might be truncated down to closer to 50, depending on the life you lead. And yet, in those 50 hours, you have this desire, and you should have an expectation to have the joy factor, fulfill it with things that you love and that make you happy and fill your soul. And also make sure that in that 50 to 72 hour block, you're also being a responsible human being and doing the things that prepare you to be your best when you are at work or in school or whatever that 8 hour core responsibility is. And when I break that down for people, it's something tangible. Junior professionals, young adults, they start getting it. And they're like, oh my gosh, wow. It's kind of, when you break it down in numbers and days, that's a fair amount of time, right? There's enough time to read. One of the huge issues we have right now is that young adults, junior professionals, do not read books. Imagine that, right? Because Meredith, I know that you are an avid reader. I know that from our conversations. What would you say is the significance of your avid reading, separate and apart from the leisure benefit or the joy benefit that you get? What do you get from that?
It's always expanding my thinking.
Yes.
I'm growing in my brain as far as learning, and also getting ideas of ways I can either do something better or think better about decision making. There's so many areas. I recently read this wonderful book called The Boys in the Boat. There's a recent movie of that. And it's a true story of this crew who won the Olympic gold in 1936. And the character strengths that were required for them to persist and do, to me, was so inspiring. So that's an example of so many takeaways besides enjoying the reading of that amazing story, which was one of the best written books I've ever read. I also had such deep admiration for what it took for them to persist in spite of immense pain and challenges. So there's so many things that often come from a book that you can't even anticipate in advance when you read it. But it's that expansion of my mind and my thinking so that it's always growing. I think that's a key piece.
And that's so critical. And you've articulated exactly what I hoped you would say. This was not a plant, everybody. We didn't even discuss this question. I just knew from what I know of Meredith that she would share that. And that kind of experience is so critical because, yes, there's the beauty of the story. There's the hero's journey, right? Life often is lived in the hero's journey, the path. How do we get along that winding path to where we're trying to go and what we're trying to achieve? What are the lessons that we learn? And when we see it through characters, unbeknownst to us, often it's tapping into our soul, it's tapping into our intellect. And one of the things that I'm currently doing is I am actually reading a book with my youngest son, who's 24. And I knew that this was an issue for young adults. And I said, how would you feel about reading a book together? And he's never really enjoyed reading. He's a huge music guy. He works in the music business. And he pushed back and pushed back. And then after the holidays, he said, I'm ready. I'm ready. He's in a great job and he's building up his career. And I said, okay, pick a book, pick any book. And I was hoping he was going to pick something like Atomic Habits by James Clear or Getting Things Done by David Allen. He picked Atlas Shrugged.
Oh my.
Right? By Ayn Rand. So for those that don't know, this book is a very long book. It's a very heavy book. And I don't mean just by weight. I mean the concepts and the story, very heavy. And at first I thought, oh, we are reading one chapter at a time. And we have our own book club, just my son and myself. talking about what is happening in this book and the themes. And then we talk about, was there anything that we read that impacted our day, our week? These are things I want to encourage young people to be doing, because you're missing out. You're missing out on the very thing that Meredith just shared with all of you, is that personal and emotional growth and better understanding. Why are there leaders? Why were those people leaders? What did they do? How did they excel? What skills did they tap into? What skills did they develop? That's what we want to encourage, so that we can help everybody along and also identify the people who are going to be the leaders for us, just as you and I have been leaders for so many.
There's so many things you've been saying. I've been thinking, all right, I want to come back to this and that. So let me touch on a couple of different things. One, I know of some companies that have book clubs for like within their own teams or even broader company wide that have tremendous impact. One in particular, they have a theme for the year, and then they read books related to that theme and talk about how they can apply that. So it's sort of what you and your son are doing, but in a group setting. And I think that's very powerful, because the leader is demonstrating reading is important and making it tied in and relevant. I think that's the thing that's so critical for people to be enthusiastic about, whatever it might be, but in particular reading. What's the relevance of this? How is it going to have meaning for me? And I think anyone who can bring that to life for someone else, it's a huge door opener in terms of creating more interest in more of that activity. I want to go back to what you were saying earlier when you were imagining talking to someone on your team. To me, what you were speaking to, that I just got chills, because I thought, this is so powerful. You are speaking to that person's potential by talking about what you look to do and conveying to them in a way that said, you can be this too. It's possible. So it had such a different tone to it. It lands so differently when you own what it is about who you want to be, who you want to show up as, and then kind of, and you didn't mention this, but I'm sure you do this, is turning it around to them and say, what do you think? What about this is exciting to you? What about this maybe scares you to think, oh, I don't know if I could do that, so that you can identify development opportunities for that person.
100%. One of the things that we regularly do, and I personally do it, my law partner does it, is we go around the room and have individual conversations as well. What's working and what's not. And when we get to what's not, we have a further line of questioning, which I'm going to come back to in 1 minute. What's working? This is what's working. Why do you think it's working? Why is it successful? Is there anything you think we could tweak to make it even better? And then what's not working? Well, this is not working. Tell me why it's not working. Do you feel like it's not working for you? Is it also not working for the team? Because let's break that down. If it's not working for you, that's a different conversation about how we can be responsive and thoughtful. If it's not working for the team in an individual person's, opinion, let's bring the team in. Let's have a conversation. It's been brought to my attention. We don't out the person. It's been brought to my attention that perhaps the following situation is not working. How do people feel about that? Oh, you agree it doesn't work either? It's not feeling good? Let's have an open conversation. And then getting to, well, do you have any solutions? Do you have any ideas about how we could do it better? Because of course, I'm probably going to have some ideas, but it doesn't mean that my ideas are the right ideas. Especially because I have to be mindful, I'm working in a very different context. I have 30 plus years of experience practicing as a lawyer. I've been a managing partner for nearly 25 years. I've had experiences of building businesses, selling businesses, being a mom, being a mentor. if the persons that I'm speaking with have not had all of those contexts, the reason something might not be working could be something that I don't even understand. And so
Mhm.
I want them to be part of the solution because, by the way, I may have to contribute something that I couldn't possibly see because it doesn't fall naturally into my purview. Right?
Absolutely. Yes. And, circling back, you were mentioning there were three things you did with your team. One of them was asking what's working and what's not. Were there some other points you wanted to make around what you do to get involvement with your team? Because I think that would be valuable.
Sure. So I have been known to reach out to consultants from time to time and bring them in. Of course, I'm building out my own consultancy practice. In this particular instance, our most recent rounds, and we've been doing this now for well over 2 years, is we've been working with a woman, Grace McCarrick of Grace Note Strategies. She is a work culture specialist, and she's fascinating. And she is a young professional, somebody who started out originally in one area, was not happy, and built out her own business, and is very tapped into seeing, especially in remote and hybrid situations, the disconnects that, notwithstanding how hard I try to be connected, there are gaps. And so we'll work with her directly. We just had our firm retreat and she came in and did some exercises with us and then gave us back some deliverables afterwards. And then I'll also think about, well, okay, here are some things we've learned in a retreat setting, coming back to the group and saying, these are the conversations that came up. Are there any that you feel we should prioritize to tackle? So one of the things that has been a struggle for people at our firm, and I know across the board, so I feel like my own firm is a case study, just like my kids are a case study. I'm my own case study, is time management, right? I mentioned David Allen's Getting Things Done. There are lots of time management books out there. Why is time management important? Because the day can move so quickly, given where we are in 2023, because of technology, because of how fast-paced things are, the day moves very, very quickly. I mean, how many times have any of you who are listening or watching gotten up in the morning and the next thing you know, it's 6 o'clock and you think, how did the day go by? I really wanted to do X, Y, Z. I didn't get to those things. I guess I'll get to them tomorrow or next week, etc. Time management is about identifying how you're going to tackle things so that you feel accomplished and to relieve yourself of the stress weighing on you when things that you know have to get done don't get done. And people don't realize the emotional toll that it takes when you don't complete projects. And I learned more about this today, Meredith, from Steve Fretson. We were talking about it today. And he was sharing, he said, think about it. You have these things, you know you have to get them done. You know they're critical for your job or for your professional development or the opportunity that you want to pursue elsewhere. You don't do them. And now you're feeling defeated. You are feeling defeated. In contrast, if you have a good time management system where you set good habits about how you're going to get certain things done and when you're going to get them done, and making sure that something that you put on your calendar, if you didn't do it when you put on your calendar, you don't let it go. You move it on your calendar to another time and you double down and you commit to do it. When you finish that task, it doesn't really matter how big or small. There are hormones, there are things that start going off. You get a boost of energy because you're accomplished. You're a hero in that moment. And you're a hero for yourself, right? And then add to that, what impact does that have on your job and your ability to excel and succeed and be noticed and grow? And then again, your potential to be a leader, because over time, people are going to see you as somebody, as a model of example. And I always start with, I have to lead by example. I must lead by example. And when I'm not doing well, if I'm not in control of my time management, I tell my team, I'm struggling with it. Are you struggling with it? I'm struggling with it. I want to tell you what's happening. Do you have any ideas? And then I can also share the hacks that work for me, right? And so that's been a hyper goal for me over 2023 and 2024. And I've been writing about it and posting about it. How just the smallest little things, stacking habits, doing certain things in a certain way, where it just becomes part of your process.
Mm-hmm.
And that sense of accomplishment, to me, is one of the ingredients in the recipe for the joy factor of your life.
Mm. So well said.
Thank you.
Excuse me. One of the things, just a second. One of the things I love about what you just shared was when you said when you struggle yourself, you go to your team and you acknowledge that. And I think too often leaders feel like they have to act like they've got it all together and they can't be vulnerable. They can't admit, I don't have this all figured out. Whereas if they would own that, do you find that it brings your team closer to you and closer together when you share something you're struggling with rather than trying to figure it out on their own? Because they can read you and they can tell something's not right. But if you don't share what that is, they're left to wonder.
Yes, on so many levels. And we could spend hours talking about this. I'll give 2 examples. So one, I find that when I share a vulnerability of mine, I can ask for help, which for years, being raised as somebody to be an entrepreneur and a leader, I thought, oh, I'm the warrior. I'm the warrior. I cannot have even the slightest chip in my armor in order to succeed. And the truth of the matter is, every warrior needs to rest, right? Every warrior needs to take a step back at times to think about strategy, how to do better, how to have a better plan, make a pivot. And so when I show that vulnerability, it's almost like when you think about breathing exercises, it gives you that moment to do, a deep inhale and a big exhale and kind of let people share with you, give to you. Right? I'm a giver. I am a natural giver. I think most people in my life would say, the Ariana that they know, I thrive on serving others.
That's why we like each other so much.
Yes. And yet I would say to you, Meredith, that when I was growing up as a young person and when I was being raised by my driven parents, I don't think they would have at the time, certainly not my father, would have described me as a giver or a servant leader, or even wanted me to be that per se, right? And yet over these years, I've come to the conclusion that when I serve, my soul is filled, and that means I'm much more capable of achieving great things. And so bringing that vulnerability is in its own way giving, because I'm giving to myself. I'm saying,
Mm-hmm.
let me be honest with myself. And then you're giving to the team saying, nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. And I say this, perfect is the enemy of the good. Perfect is also the enemy of done. That's a big one. Perfect is the enemy of done. We aim at Tadler Law, and I aim with all other teams I've built for excellence. We aim for excellence. We are known for our grace and our tenacity to achieve results and own the room. If we spend every minute, every second of the day to be perfect, we could not possibly serve all of our clients and do all the great things that we do, because there are only so many minutes in the day. Right? So point one, yes, bringing the vulnerability is critical. And the other is to encourage people when they see your vulnerability to share theirs, so that we can identify, okay, this person is struggling. We see them as a leader. We see their potential. They're struggling. And how do we know? We know because body language is changing, tone, choice of words, or most recently in our retreat, we had a person on our team who said, this series of months, the communication that came from the top changed. And I said, tell me more about it. What do you mean? And the answer was, and we happened to be preparing a case that was gearing towards trial. The answer was, everything felt very tight. We kind of truncated everything, whereas we're givers, we're talkers, we're sharers. We suddenly were so driven to get to goal, get to goal, get to goal, that the sense that was in the ether for the team was that there wasn't time or space to articulate a vulnerability that they were feeling, I have to tell her this, or I have to share this, or this is something we need to get her to focus on. And they felt like there was not room for that. And I said, thank you for sharing that with me. I apologize. That is a sign that I was not doing my job, because I need to be receptive to you. If I'm going to leave the firm, I need to know that you feel confident, comfortable, empowered to come with whatever it is. And it was really, I show vulnerability, encourage other people to share and show when they're struggling with something or they need something.
That's so powerful. And Ariana, we could talk for another hour. I'm going to need to kind of wrap this up. There's so much that you have said that to me exemplifies the whole purpose of my podcast. Because while, you haven't said the words, I'm focused on growth and development myself, everything you've talked about reflects that in the way that you just shared that example of apologizing, welcoming input, and encouraging people to open up and creating an environment where they feel safe to do that. And that's just one example from everything that you've said. It's been a wonderful, I think, lesson for people. So many insights that you've shared, I think, are takeaways for each one of us on how can we show up in a way that encourages other people to be open, to be vulnerable. What do we need to do to get and of course, you've talked about your sons. This holds true for us as parents as well as in the workplace. So I think that what you have given us is just a wonderful gift. And I want to thank you so much for who you are in the world as a servant leader, as just a magnificent human being. And I'm so delighted that you were my guest here today. Quickly tell people, how can they learn more about you, connect with you, and find out more about your services?
Sure. Well, thank you so much, first and foremost, for having me as your guest. This has been a thrill and a joy for me to be here. You can find me pretty easily. If you're watching, you can see that our firm's name is Tadler Law LLP. You can just go to tadlerlaw.com. You'll find me right there. You can find me on Instagram at just Ariana Tadler, one word, and on LinkedIn, similarly, Ariana Tadler. I do aim to post, and I have made a commitment for myself for 2024 to start sharing this wisdom much more widely, both through the written word, through some video content, and I'm now being approached to come into companies, law firms, conferences as a keynote. And I'm excited to say that I've set my own new goal. I'm aiming to do a TEDx talk in 2024.
All right. Well, let me know when you do that so I can promote it. Thank you again, Ariana, for being with me today. It's just been absolute joy talking with you.
Thank you, Meredith. And thank you for doing all that you're doing to grow strong leaders.
Thanks for tuning into my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out our 2 books, Connect with Your Team and Peer Coaching Made Simple. While you're there, download the free facilitator guide to find out how to implement our unique peer coaching system. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.